Hello everyone, today we're at the Tank Museum at Bovington and we look at the Matilda in Soviet service. So we talk about what the Soviets liked about it and what they didn't like about it.
Now the Matilda II is my favorite British World War II tank, yet the Soviets had some problems with it. Then they didn't fight against it in Steel Panthers like I did, they fought with it on the Eastern Front. And generally, you don't want to fight on the Eastern Front. First off, some basics about the Matilda II. It was the successor to the A-11 Infantry Tank Mark I, Matilda I, which was only armed with a machine gun. The Infantry Tank Mark II A-12, generally called Matilda II, initially should also only be armed with machine guns, but was soon upgraded to a 2-pounder gun, 40mm. This was one of the best anti-tank guns at the time. As many other pre-war anti-tank guns, it would soon become rather obsolete. The first order for 140 units was given in June 1938, so almost 2 years before its combat debut in May 1940 in France. Here its strong armor caused serious troubles for the Germans at the Battle of Arras. Let us now look what the Soviets thought about the Matilda II, or MK2 as they generally called it in their documents. It first arrived in the Soviet Union in fall 1941, along with the Valentine infantry tank. And it would take part in the defense of Moscow. From this point on, it would serve in the Red Army up to the end of the war in 1945. In total, 1,084 Matilda tanks of all types were sent to the USSR between September 1941 and March of 1943. 916 tanks arrived at their destination. All Matilda tanks arrived in the USSR via Arctic convoys. Since in total a bit less than 3,000 Matilda II were produced, the Red Army received more than 1/3 of all Matilda IIs. Now let's look at the Soviets' views. Let's start with firepower. Here the Soviets were not happy at all. Although the 2-pounder was one of the best anti-tank guns in the 1930s, similar to the German 37mm anti-tank gun, by 1940 it was seriously dated since tanks got more and more armor. Yet while both guns failed against thicker armor, there was a major difference, namely the ammo types. The 2-pounder only used armor-piercing shells without any high-explosive filler. So if the armor was penetrated, there was no charge to explode inside the tank. Meanwhile, the German 37mm gun used an armor-piercing high-explosive shell. Yet there was more. The 2-pounder had no high-explosive ammunition at all. This is particularly crucial if one looks at the German reports about the 37mm anti-tank gun. In German question years after the Battle of France, all of the 26 formations listed that the 37mm pack was ineffective, nicht bewährt, literally not proven for anti-tank duties. Yet when it came to other duties like firing at embrasures, 2 formations noted it was especially effective. And 30 noted it was effective, while no formation reported it was ineffective. Additionally, when used with the high explosive round, a total of 24 formations noted it was especially effective, and 13 that it was effective. Furthermore, 23 formations noted that the gun was especially feared by the enemy in this respect. Meanwhile, the Matilda II had no high explosive ammo available at all, so it could not be used against soft targets, while also being ineffective against tanks with strong armor with its armor-piercing ammo. The Soviets thought about arming the Matilda II with the same 76mm gun that was used in the KV-1 and T-34. Yet despite a successful trial of the prototype, it never reached beyond the prototype stage, since there were no free factories available and a lack of guns as well. Now there were also Matildas with the 76mm howitzer, namely the Matilda III CS tank, and a handful of them were sent to the Soviet Union. These only came with high explosive and smoke shells, yet at a ratio of 1 high explosive to 2 smoke shells due to British tactics, something the Soviets were not happy about. After Soviet complaints, the ratio was changed to 3 high explosive for 1 smoke shell. While the Soviets seriously disliked the firepower, they particularly liked the strong armor of the Matilda. The Soviet trials of the tank noted that the Matilda II had a powerful all-around protection with a relatively small size and weight compared to Soviet, American and German medium tanks. The armor thickness at the front was up to 78mm, the side of the hull around 65 to 70mm, even the thinnest plates were 20mm. The Matilda used a combination of rolled and cast armor. The Soviets particularly noted the widespread use of cast armor. Additionally, they remarked that the number of access hatches was reduced to a minimum, which increased the overall structural integrity. The skirt armor was recognized for protecting the suspension and making it easier to cross obstacles, but it was also noted that it increased the weight and made maintenance more complicated. At the front line, the Matilda II was used effectively, particularly in the winter of 1941-42. Its armor was comparable to the KV-1, and the German anti-tank guns struggled with the 37 and 50mm guns to penetrate these heavy armored tanks. One Soviet unit only lost 8 Matildas in 2 months, which was a comparatively low number. Yet this would change from summer 1942 onwards, since the Germans began to receive the 75mm PaK-40 anti-tank gun in larger numbers. This gun was the German tank killer of World War II. It could penetrate the Matilda, which due to its low speed was turned from an almost impenetrable turtle to a sitting duck. This brings us to the next part, namely mobility or the lack thereof. Already in France, the Matilda II had some serious issues, as David Fletcher notes. Apart from some engine trouble, the worst failings of the A12 Matildas in France were their tracks. Once the indentations had packed with mud, they became virtually smooth and unable to grip on soft ground or the path sets of French roads. As you can imagine, adding to this the Soviet infrastructure, the Russian winter, and mud periods, it's not going to get better. The Matilda was not helpless in winter, but the traction on icy roads was bad. The track links were just not designed for such an environment. Frontline reports noted that in many cases the driver had lost control of the tracks and ended up in the ditch. To improve traction, spurs were welded onto the tracks. This resulted in a far more controllable tank. The turning radius could be decreased from 30 meters to a mere 4 meters. Although one problem was that the spurs on the road got worn out rather fast. When it came to snow obstacles, the Soviet trials had it cross 3 different obstacles. It took 21 minutes for the Matilda. The same obstacles were crossed by the Panzerjägertruppe Ausführung H in 16 minutes, a British Valentine II in 40 minutes, and a T-34 in 10 seconds. Yes, 10 seconds. The reason was that the T-34 had more engine power and thus momentum, so it just broke through the obstacles. The Soviet engineers looking at the Matilda engines were quite disappointed. The pair of diesel engines had a weight of 1000 kg with about 190 horsepower, while the Soviet V2 had only 750 kg with an output of 500 horsepower. One main benefit was that the Matilda could move with just one engine, providing important redundancy on the battlefield. Yet overall, the Matilda's engine power was weak. With 190 horsepower and a combat weight of 26.9 metric tons, it had a horsepower to weight ratio of a mere 7.1. The Panzer IV-G had 12 horsepower per ton. The Panther had 13.4 horsepower per metric ton. The Soviet heavy tank IS-2 had 11.3. One of the few armored fighting vehicles that come close with such a low ratio is the heaviest German armored fighting vehicle in World War II, the Jagdtiger, which still had 8. So the Matilda was clearly underpowered. There were some various other issues that Soviets commented on, like visibility. Here they noted that the Matilda had a small amount of observation devices, yet that the visibility was better than that of the T-34 and KV-1. The Matilda's good vision was from the Mark IV observation devices, which had a wide range of vision. Some other problems were not directly related to the tank itself, like missing equipment. About 1/3 of the tanks had no tarps and documentation. Similarly, some came without tools or without towing cables. This was, according to Peter Samsonov, also an issue with Land-Lease Shermans as well. Another issue relating to towing was the hull design. There were various boxes mounted on the side of the hull. This was not obvious to everyone. Additionally, the front part of the hull was also not one piece like with many other tanks. So if the tow hooks were attached to the wrong sections of the hull, one ripped off parts of the tank, which led to premature ending of the towing operation. Although the introduction of the PaK-40 in 1942 severely diminished the main strength of the Matilda, namely its armor protection, it was still used until 1945 by the Red Army. By January 1944, the number of Matildas in the Red Army was at 315, so about 1/3 of the total original number supplied. For summer 1944 we have some additional numbers. 201 Matildas were in repair factories at the beginning of June 1944, while only 48 were still operational. By 1st January 1945 the total number had dropped to 218, so about 20% of the initial number. Of these, 10 were lost until the end of the war. To summarize, the Soviets liked the Matilda for its strong armor. They commanded the good visibility and good protection for its size and weight. When it came to mobility, they noted serious issues. While some of these issues like mobility in snow and traction on ice are more important for the Eastern Front, there were also general problems like that the tank was clearly underpowered with a horsepower to weight ratio of 7.1 that is even lower than that of the Jagdtiger. Yet probably the biggest issue in terms of combat effectiveness was its weak and particularly inflexible firepower. The lack of penetration power of the gun was one thing, but the complete absence of high explosive ammo meant that the Matilda could not provide fire support against soft targets like other outdated anti-tank guns.
A big thank you to the Tank Museum in Bovington for inviting me. Thank you to my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar for making trips like this possible. As always, thank you for watching and see you next time.